can you look yourself in the mirror? I think you've done the best you've done and you're making the right decision.
PWC is one of the big four accountancy firms in the world, and Kevin Ellis served as the chairman and senior partner of the company, guiding the firm through significant change.
I loved my job and I loved my firm and people I work with, but I haven't really missed it. And that's not a negative. It's just a different time of life.
His focus on building trust and leading with inclusivity has shaped PWC into a global leader in both the accountancy and business sectors.
Looking after yourself physically and mentally is as important as doing the job.
Yeah.
I've learned more from things I've not managed to do than I ever learned from the things I've passed or achieved at.
What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received? One thing that you would do if you were Rachel Reeves today with your financial hat on, which that you think they missed?
We all read the papers and we're all reading about the fact we need to get more people into work. So something along those lines, whether it is in terms of the apprentice levy, the easier the pathway between education and first job and training contract and experience, the better.
Yeah.
Now, I've got teenage children and early 20s children, who in some cases are entering the workplace now or entering the future. So I hear what their friends and how many job applications they're doing. The easier the pathway into work, the better I think the economy would be, because more people paying taxes, income tax, national insurance, and the like, the more money the government will raise. So I think making it easier into the first job and training contracts, the better. If that's an apprenticeship model change, or if that's a pathway change, or a business support change, I don't know. I'm not an expert. But that is the thing. Getting more people working is a good thing for mental health, because people are valued and they're doing something that they enjoy, and getting something from, as well as financial reward, societal friendship, and feeling valued, then that's better.
Talking mental health, and when you're in your leadership position, did you ever have your integrity challenged?
Yeah, it is always challenged. I did select committees where people said, could you not have done a better job? There's always the power of hindsight in those situations. Could you not have done things better? And I think you always have to, in those times, remember the rule book you faced up to at the time and why you made those decisions. Yes, you should be accountable as a leader. I completely get that. But sometimes with the power of hindsight, it's easier for people to say, you should have done this differently or that differently. I think it's more important to learn from the decisions you made versus the facts you faced. But you always have your integrity challenge to an extent. I think it's more important, can you look yourself in the mirror? I think you've done the best you've done and you're making the right decision.
Right. And were there any times that specifically where you felt, this is on the edge?
Oh, loads of times. We go back in history.
Yeah.
I mean, any time there's an inquiry of any sort, it's easy to forget the decision making at the time, because not to make a decision is always going to be wrong. So if you didn't make a decision, you can't be wrong. Well, actually, you're always going to be wrong if you don't make a decision. You've got to make a call as a leader. That builds confidence, but also there is, sometimes going to be a red one or a green one. And unless you call one of them, you're definitely wrong. So a lot of the times you've got to weigh it up. You've got to rely on your board. You've got to put the right people around you so that, as I said, that nearly all the big decisions we made as a business, this is the same for every other CEO, are made in the public eye or the employee's eye by an individual.
Yeah.
The reality is it's not. It's made by a group of individuals, the board. So probably the most important thing you do as a leader is selecting a board where you have enough diversity of thought, of experience, and of know-how. And what you want to be is not the cleverest person in the room, but able to listen to the cleverest person in the room when you're making the decision. So a lot of the times we had our board discussions about some of the biggest decisions, like the COVID decisions and working from home decisions, and decisions that really were going to impact families, 26,000 people, sometimes making redundancies because sometimes things don't work out and you have to do that. I always had to kind of hold myself back as a leader, because I knew once I'd said it's a red one, chances are most other people would say, I'm with Kevin, he's the boss, so it's a red one. So I always tried to make my decision last and just kind of feel the room first, get the input, because that's what they're there for. And then effectively, with cabinet responsibility, make that decision.
I just wonder what the difference is between the partnership model and a limited company, and whether there are different pressures.
Possibly, but again, I suppose for partners, partnership's interesting, right? So the partners are the owners of the business, why they're partners, and they're also employed by the business. Their income every year is determined by their performance, but their income is in, if you like, two portions: salary and an investment return. So therefore, as you're voted in, I was voted in by the partners, as is my successor and future successors. They're voted in by the majority of the partners. You're answerable to them. I don't think that's that different in a corporate, because you're answerable to the shareholders in a corporate. So as long as you can explain to the shareholders why you've made that decision, and there's a business decision. So if we were a limited company rather than a partnership, and my investors said, why are you spending money being the number one social mobility employer? As long as I could do in my investor relations note, explain what I just explained to you,
Sure.
that should be fine.
Yeah.
But it depends how you communicate, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I have these deeper conversations with business leaders. The whispers are there. I don't think anyone disagrees that, the best people need to be in the room. They deserve to be there. I don't think anyone. It's when they sense there's a sort of sense of positive discrimination.
I get that, and people will always look on it and have their own interpretation, because the lens they're looking through might be that, well, why wasn't it me? And they might, and no one ever really explains, like a football manager, why are you playing that footballer and not that footballer? So everyone's got a view, haven't they?
Certainly do around football, that's for sure. Did you feel isolated in leadership? Not lonely, but isolated.
Yeah. You do, because at the end of the day, the decisions you make as a board, when you're explaining them as an individual. There's only you on the stage or you signing off on that piece of paper. So yes, you are isolated. And the way I dealt with that, alongside family and friends and networks, what I always talk about, was I had people around me, as well as the board, but also my support team. And I always wanted to choose people that were energy givers and positive to be around. That's what I needed. I was self-aware enough of my own limitations to know what I needed around me. From secretary to chiefs of staff, I knew I had to have people, I'm sure they were technically brilliant, but they also had to be high energy.
Yeah, brilliant. I absolutely love the way that you just phrased that. That's awesome. And in terms of delving into that inner circle a bit, you talked about friends, family, networks, etc. What did you have around you? Like, what were the sort of first tier, second tier, third tier of support?
My secretary had been my secretary for over 30 years. So I knew and trusted her particularly. And so she was kind of first port of call on lots of different things. I mean, there's a really good example that when we all faced up to COVID and we sent, in my case, at the time we had 23,000 employees, we sent 23,000 employees home with no preparation. And at the time, we didn't know whether the Wi-Fi would work. We didn't really know what was going to happen next. And then we made the decision that we had to kind of do something to make sure people felt secure, because everything else was so insecure at the time.
Yeah.
And the reason we did that, again, the economic reason, was because they didn't feel secure, they wouldn't work. So you wanted them to work at home. You could, inverted commas, say unsupervised, but we're a professional service organisation. People do things a lot on their own, but you're sending them back into their households with all the other uncertainties. You've got the daily update from Downing Street about how many people have died and how many people got this illness. No one knows when we're coming out of it. Park benches were even taped off in some places. You weren't allowed to sit down. I mean, it was a very strange time. We look back on it, it was like watching a film, but we all lived through it. Or certainly I lived through it and you lived through it. And we thought, what can we do to make people feel kind of safe as we possibly can? So we came out and guaranteed their jobs. And there was a whole process to do that, and we guaranteed their jobs. And we made an announcement that everyone's jobs were safe. And my secretary sent me a WhatsApp from her phone that said all her mates in their WhatsApp group, obviously other PAs and friends, people in the organisation, saying, he's lying. That's not true. He can't possibly guarantee everyone's jobs. He's bound to say that. And we kind of thought, how, having gone through all this thought and preparation to make this big announcement, you do feel slightly deflated.
Yeah.
So whether it's isolated or deflated, but one of the two. And I remember talking to the comms team, Emma Thorogood and the comms team, and said, what do we do? Do I do another email? Do I kind of shout? What do I do? How do I get them? And we decided to go to the press. So we actually spoke to Ian King's team at Sky and Geordie Gregg at the Daily Mail. And Sky sent a van round to my house, and we did on the street, and during COVID, all the net curtains flicking. I did an interview with Ian King as to why we were guaranteeing everyone's jobs and explain what we'd done. And then Geordie did a leader in the Daily Mail about what we were doing. And suddenly, because it was in the newspaper and on Sky, and everyone was watching Sky at the time, everyone believed us because their mums and dads and boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands and wives had seen it on telly. And so it's really interesting. So suddenly everyone going, oh, he must tell you the truth because I've just seen him say it on Sky to Ian King, or Geordie Gregg's just done a quote from him in the paper. So it was really interesting how you build trust, but it was kind of, it was such a unique time.
Sure.
You had to use different channels and routes of communication to kind of somehow build trust when you thought it should happen anyway.
Social proof, right? Interesting. Very interesting.
The other thing we had alongside was because there's kind of 300 or 400 emails a day, there's lots of different things you've got to do. You're kind of constantly paddling to stand still in that job because there's lots of requirements. So you have a kind of chief of staff, and that person does 2 years. So they're normally a partner, and they do 2 years kind of running the chairman's office. I know it sounds very grand, but the reality is someone's got to make sure you get the right emails in front of you, you get to the right events on time, you've got a speech ready to give, or whatever, as well as see the clients you need to see and the staff you need to see. So, but we always had it's a 2-year term of office. We wanted one to get different views into the chairman's office, and I enjoyed being challenged or getting energy from different types of people.
Yeah.
So 2 years was enough. Also, that's important for their careers because they didn't just want to go back and serve clients. The other thing was it's a great learning experience. So 2 members of my board had done that role for my previous senior partner, and one of Marco's board was a chief of staff for me. So it's a really good way of giving people, if you like, early experience of how a business like ours is run.
Yeah.
But also, from my point of view, it gave me both that kind of protective barrier, if you like, for getting stuff done and staying on top of everything, but also that energy because they knew what was going on. So you could kind of bounce things off them really quickly. As well, alongside my secretary. And they could also tell me what people were thinking, because sometimes when you're a boss, amazingly, people don't necessarily like to challenge you or tell you bad news. So they were another kind of, if you like, a periscope on terms of culture and what's going on. Like, no one's really listened to you, Kevin. They don't believe you. It's quite useful.
Yeah, and having the self-awareness and understanding that is actually going on. Because it happens in every business, doesn't it? It's just, oh, he's the boss. I'm not going to tell him what to do. I've got to,
I've got a job to protect.
Got my pay and the mortgage and these fees and all the rest of it.
Really helpful to me in terms of that. Just reminding, it makes you more self-aware because it reminds you of the reality. And otherwise, sometimes you kind of, people show you what they want you to see.
It's interesting because it's almost highlighting the disconnection. There's, I think, when I look at leaders, when leaders are talked about, we talked about this earlier about the headlines, and it's much easier to write that, Kevin Ellis is this and that and the other, and leave out all the context to it. And I think that's the part where I think people start to feel alienated and disjointed. And, again, I come back to the pay point earlier, and they see these headlines and go, oh, well, he's up there in the ivory tower and he has no idea what's going on. So it's really interesting to hear that. And I think useful to people listening who are leaders and CEOs to have those point people out there looking out for you. It's clever. Yeah.
It's very easy to get buried in the day, in the moment, because stuff is always coming at you. It's like being on a speeding 125 train and stuff's coming past the window all the time. Yeah. And I regularly said to my team, allow time for me to go wandering around the office, particularly in COVID when we're trying to get people back into the office. We used to go on a wander around the office, and people used to kind of try and duck when they saw me coming because they weren't quite sure what I was doing walking on their floor at that time when they were the only person on the floor, But it was quite useful just to talk to people about, back in the office, how's it feeling, whatever. I think you do need to, as a leader, you can't wander around the office on your phone. You've got to be present. Because the chances are that's the only time that member of staff is ever going to have a conversation with you. So they'll remember that. How would you feel if the time you're talking to your boss, he or she's on their phone? So And you don't have to remember that. I mean, it took me a while sometimes. I didn't always get it right. But people pointed it out to me, and I always remembered. And I often say to people, wander around the office, not on your phone, talking to people who are wandering past you is actually really important in terms of the culture. But also sometimes people tell you things that maybe some people don't want you to hear. So that's useful as well.
Would your family see it the same way? When you had that job, were you, did you have the same presence for them?
Yeah, lots of times, no. Because, I don't know, I remember going to a cricket match when my youngest was about 7 or 8, and he's out there on the cricket field. It's Sunday morning. It was the day after the terrorist incident at London Bridge, and one of our buildings was part of the lockdown area at More London. And we were trying to work out what notes it was a Sunday morning, so we had to work out what notes we put out to staff, and we kind of had to link it up with other people on the estate. So people didn't say one thing and someone else said something else. So there was a number of conversations that were happening kind of CEO to CEO, if you like, as well as our comms team and other people. So I was on the phone virtually this whole cricket match. And after Sam came off, he said, "I'm not sure you need to come anymore, Danny. What you're going to do is be on the phone." I don't think you could see me, because it's like you're on the phone. You think you're watching because you're on the phone. You assume that kind of somehow the phone is mysteriously invisible. And that kind of does bring you up quite short as to what that messaging was for him. Because every time he looked over, when I was obviously watching him play cricket, I was on the phone.
And that was when he was 7 or 8.
Yeah. And he remembers, he still remembers things like that.
I think all kids remember something about that.
So you kind of, and there was always this joke about, oh yeah, Daddy's on the phone. It was kind of a bit of a kind of, it does happen with a job. I mean, at the same time, I'd rather be at the cricket match than probably at home on the phone, but yeah.
If you were to advise your predecessor or any man in their sort of 40s and 50s, got a 7-year-old, got a high-powered job, what would you say?
Yeah, so I think you just got to be as present as you possibly can be within the constraints of the job. Mm. There's also a lot of stuff that when you're in an important role, you can delegate, and it's tempting not to. You can get caught up in the time. I did it loads of times. There was stuff I ended up doing that I didn't need to do. Someone else could have done it. But I kind of, you feel quite important doing it. It's there. Oh, I might as well do it rather than give it to someone else. And so I think the discipline, and it takes you a while playing yourself into any of these roles, because you don't suddenly get the role and know exactly how you're going to do it. So I always said to people, remember that. Remember the importance of your family and delegate as much as you can so you have that time. Mm. The second thing is your health. These jobs are grueling. Mm. But no one should feel sorry for us. We paid a lot of money. They were fantastic. I loved every second of it. But they are grueling. I mean, you're out. I was out probably most nights of the week. I got up most mornings at 5:30. It was just how it was. And I was really cautious about how much I ate and how much extra exercise I had to do. Because at the end of the day, it's a bit of a marathon. So,
sure.
So I always say to people when you're doing these jobs, looking after yourself physically and mentally is as important as doing the job.
Yeah. And what was your non-negotiable in terms of looking after yourself health-wise?
Probably making sure I did at least 2 or 3 exercise sessions in the morning over the course of the week. And I always ran on Saturday mornings with some mates, which was as much about the social side as it was more banter and canter than running, if I'm really honest with you. But I mean, but what I mean, it was the kind of release from that.
Yeah.
And I never went out on Friday. I never booked anything on Friday night. The other thing was non-negotiable, is I never booked anything at the weekend.
Right.
So from Friday at 5 until effectively Monday at 6 o'clock again in the morning, I had nothing in my diary. And my secretary and my team and I were now, things happened, like the tragic incident at London Bridge or invasion of Ukraine, and things happen where you had to be on the phone and on the call.
Yeah.
But again, it's very, very easy in a job like mine with all the European and global stuff to end up saying, let's always have a call on a Saturday night, or so always have a call on a Sunday night. Mm-hmm. Once you've done that, it's not just a call, it's remembering you've got the call. It's interfering with all the family events like dinners and birthdays and everything else because that call's coming. So if you like, that was the non-negotiable. Friday night till Sunday night was family time, unless something dramatic happened that I had to do. And I very rarely flew on a Sunday night.
Right.
Probably in my whole time, the 8 years, I probably actually flew less than 5 times. Because again, it's very easy. I'm going to Japan next week. I'll go on a Sunday night. And of course, it's not Sunday night. It's normally the Saturday night by the time I get to Japan, never going to Asia.
Sure.
And then that weekend's gone.
So you managed to segment your family and work. I mean, when you say you didn't have anything booked, did you still work the week?
No, I did bits. If stuff happened, I might do the odd email or rehearse the odd speech or dawdle something or think of something. But no, there was no kind of between 2 and 4, I'm going to do this. It was a break. And I found that really helpful because often a lot of the ideas I had or thoughts I had, are turning over in your brain. And, that was important. I mean, sometimes in the day, we used to I didn't go back to back all day with meetings. I would have gaps in the day, A, to kind of catch up on things, B, to kind of wander around the office, or C, just to think. Because you do need some thinking time. You're not a machine.
To be creative, right? Yeah. And in terms of just seeing the way in which you sort of, I guess, segmented your life, I was going to ask what role and how important is the role that your wife played? Catherine and I've been together for years. She kind of knows me. So she was important kind of, it wasn't really a sounding board because I'm not dragging her into the business because that wasn't how it worked. But she was there supporting our children. She did a lot more on that than I did. But also she was always there as support. She knew a lot of people I worked with. So that support role is critical. But people do it in different ways. I mean, not everyone has the same model. That was a model that worked for me because of the trust we had and how we worked together. But everyone's got a different model. If you look back at the success that you've had, would you pin quite a lot of it on the security and the support of Catherine?
Oh, yeah. Because if you're distracted at home and loads of things are coming at you from it would be very hard to spend the time. I'm not saying you couldn't do it. I'm sure loads of people can. I couldn't.
Warren Buffett said the most important investment decision you're ever going to make is who you end up marrying.
Yeah, probably true. Yeah, probably true.
So you're retired now?
Yep. 30th of June.
Brilliant. Before you were retired, what fears did you have about being retired?
There's an uncertainty because in my case, I started as it was then PW on the 20th of August 1984, and my entire career plan was based on getting a certificate and then going and getting another job. And I ended up there for virtually 40 years and a couple of weeks off 40 years. You are walking into the uncertainty of a whole new world. On the positive side, because mine was a term of office of 4 years, 2 terms of 4 years, I knew effectively from when I was re-elected for the second term that barring some existential event, I was leaving the firm on the 30th of June, 2024. So I had a long time to decide what I didn't want to do. That sounds a bit negative, but I constantly, if you do these kind of jobs and you've got the profile that comes with the job, people often suggest things to you. Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And I think by talking to a lot of people that are already retired, some that had done different things, I was pretty sure there's quite a lot of things I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
I was also very clear that I needed time to re-engage with myself and my family and get off the kind of hamster wheel that I've been on for 40 years. So I joke about golf, but I mean, I played golf all my life, but no more than maximum of 10 rounds in any one year. And even then, I was often looking at my phone because things were happening. So I thought, I'd join another golf club as well as one I play at. I was going to try and play golf 2 to 3 times a week. So actually not that much better, it's for truth be told. But at least it's doing something different. And actually, the playing golf without worrying about the text or the emails or the quick phone calls you've got to do is a completely different experience. You get a lot deeper and different conversations with different people. But I think what I had, if you like, the luxury I had was I had 4 years to think, what do I really not want to do? And what do I definitely want to do? And one of them was, I don't want to just bounce into something different. I want to have 6 months, maybe a year of effectively kind of getting to know myself again.
What have you found?
I quite like actually retiring, and I've done all kinds of things that I would never get a chance. Two of my boys, well, all my boys do sport, but two of them go to a weight training coach. I've never lifted weights in my life. At 61 seems a bit late to take it up, but he's always been saying, "Why don't you come and lift some tin with me?" And so I've been going there. I was there this morning at 6:30, which is a bit bonkers when you retire, and I've really enjoyed that. Taken some paddle lessons. I've done sports that I probably wouldn't have the chance to do because your diary wouldn't allow you. In the previous life, I'd have gone weight training once, and then because my diary, I probably wouldn't be able to do it for another 3 months. So it'd be a waste of time. So now I can do 2 times a week, and I just fit it in.
Great. And that's physically what you found out.
Yeah.
What have you found out about yourself?
I found I quite like having my own time. I've found that I can fill my own time, and I found that I suppose I loved my job and I loved my firm and the people I work with, but I haven't really missed it. And that's not a negative. It's just a different time of life. I'm doing a bit of investing, which is completely different because I've never done it before. I'm actually experimenting with writing a book with Dr. Phil Hopley. I think has been on this podcast before. Again, partly because they're things I've never done, and I find them energizing to try something different. But but it's early days in both those.
Oh, awesome! Tell us a bit about the book.
It was an idea suggested to us by a colleague, actually one of my chiefs of staff, Andy, after we did a live stream to our staff on one of the topics we did. He said, the two of you have known each other for years, and the combination of a business leader like you and a psychiatrist and doctor like Dr. Phil Hopley is an interesting combination. And he just said, why don't you write a book? And then one morning we were running and I said, oh, here's a bonkers idea, Phil. He mentioned this idea. And Phil said, no, actually, I've always fancied writing a book. And from there, it kind of took hold. And it's very early days. We've done a pitch document that our agents, YMU, are taking out to publishers at the moment. But the idea really is my business stories and experience as a leader combined with his sports, he's a sportsman as well as a doctor, and some of the sports people he's helped. That kind of, again, things you're talking about here, isolation, imposter syndrome, all the challenges, but also he'll bring the kind of science behind it. What does that mean neurologically? What does it mean for the brain? Why does the brain do this? Flight, all those kind of things get brought into it. And it's targeting 20-year-olds. I mean, if you like, it's targeting people post-degree, post-business school. At the start of our business journeys, our life journeys, what more could we have learned to make our lives easier or the pathway easier and things like that? So it's not targeting other CEOs. It's not a CEO book for CEOs. It's more a leadership book alongside health, mental health, and personal well-being. That's the plan anyway. But time will tell. Time will tell.
Well, my follow-up question was going to be about, you've left your legacy at PWC and talked about legacy, and you've obviously got a lot of energy left. And I was just wondering if you had thought about what legacy it is that you want to be remembered for outside of your identity as PWC.
Again, the book is part of that. So we've done a few lectures. We did a really interesting one at the group of business people called Flock. Talked then about, as a leader, how do you get comfortable with being uncomfortable? Because a lot of the times there isn't a playbook. You don't know the answers. And that whole comfortable with getting uncomfortable. We've done something with the Turnaround Managers Association, again, about mental health and challenges, and something with the League Managers Association. So those types of things are all kind of a bit of a self-discovery. Because if you like, in the past, a lot of the things you get to do when you're a CEO are to either people that work for you or clients that you hope to be working with. So now it's talking as a business leader to people who are business leaders or aspiring to be business leaders about stuff. So that's been quite interesting. I think the other thing is the investor thing that I've never done in investing. So I've done a few startups, and you get the chance to interact with young CEOs or other business investors that are probably more experienced than me. And I find that interesting. I find that just is very different. They're a kind of group of people that probably I wouldn't normally come across. In my world, it's a slightly different group. And I find it quite personally interesting. So again, I think at the moment, what I'm trying to do is put myself in slightly different situations with different people to get a different experience. And from that, maybe whatever that legacy might be, it's a bit of a grand word, that might kind of evolve from there. If someone said to me, do you want to go and do some coaching or mentoring? I think, again, probably haven't got a huge attention span. But when I'm actually an investor, I've probably got slightly more interest. Does that make sense? Probably slightly selfish, I suppose. But so I'm not sure, being a mentor, I might be a bit lazy at it, but doing it this way, I've got some kind of skin in the game.
Well, yeah, skin in the game is what any investor would ask a founder, right?
Yeah.
You know, and of course, when there's lots of skin in the game, there's lots.
And you've also got, the lucky thing, I suppose, having done my job, is you've got a relatively good network. So one of the companies we're investing in, working with, needed some advice on pricing. Through a friend of a friend of a friend, I could find them someone who would go in there and do a little stint for them, helping them on that particular thing.
Yeah.
So it's not just kind of meant to be kind of sort of a source of ideas. It's kind of that connectivity that, by dint of the lucky experience I had in my career, you kind of do know a lot of people.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I mean, there's so much good. Legacy for me can be as big and small as one wants to make it. But it's that grand old question of when, people are standing over your coffin, what are they saying about you? What are they actually saying about you? Instead, because everyone's got, most men have got some kind of work identity, and it's just so, but what did they give back? What was the energy? What was the...
Yeah, I think I'd like to think people thought I helped them or they knew me.
I'm sure they will. As my dad said, and he's a 77-year-old man. I said, Dad, just for the context of listeners, my father was an accountant, and I said I was interviewing Kevin Ellis. He went, "Oh, good man."
Well, funny enough, we've got something in common there, because my father was an accountant, which is one of the reasons that I became an accountant. I won't go through the whole story again. I've done it before, but he ended up being chairman and chief executive of Fife's Group, Bananas firm, and he came from a very poor background, and he got his accounting qualification, unlike me. He got him at evening classes post-war. And it's quite interesting. He's no longer with us, but he died when he was 91. But whenever I used to go and see him, he was the most positive person I spoke to all week. Because he said, I sit here and think, God, I was lucky. He said, and he literally, in his last few years in a care home after my mother had died, rereading books he'd read as a teenager, because it took him back to the start of his life. And he said he realised just how lucky he'd been. At that positivity, I thought, when I used to go and see him, he said, "You haven't got to come and see me. I'm all right here. I'm quite safe. You haven't got to worry about driving down to Salisbury again next weekend." I said, "No, I'd quite like to come and see you, Dad. You're so positive." So it's quite a nice feeling, isn't it? I think that whole positivity. And people don't think of accountants as being positive, but there you go. Your dad and my dad.
Yeah, well, he's been a huge influence. And I didn't know that I was going to end up sitting here. I became a chartered surveyor. Certainly wasn't coming out of school thinking I was going to be a podcast host, but I think the Bransons of this world, I think, are probably even the more famous people who are saying how important parents are to people's journeys, and the success can pretty much always lead back to parents in the way in which they talked about life. If they want to talk down life, people will talk, go into a negative spiral.
And it's a huge responsibility for us as parents.
Yeah.
On the next generation too, which is scary, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good one to reflect on. I've got 3 questions for you. What, if you hadn't done this, do you think your career could have been or would have been?
I don't know. I decided quite early to be an accountant, so it's a bit kind of... I left school and went to university at the time of the Big Bang. So nearly all the guys I played football with went into the city. It was that kind of, the phrase was barrow boy, but it was that kind of dealer mentality, kind of Harry Enfield made so famous many years later. I probably would have ended up down that path.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I've been that good at it, but that was the thing that everyone kind of did. And I was the boring one that went to university and became an accountant.
So golfer, not going to be...
Anyone that's playing with me now, having me played quite a lot the last few months, and know that wouldn't be the case.
Okay.
Or footballer, sadly.
Born accountant, got it. Okay, 3 people, living or dead, that you'd like to have dinner with.
Yeah, probably my father, if he was still with us, for the same reason we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Probably some of those amazing people in history, like your kind of Winston Churchill's, to know what was on their minds at some of those big moments in time. And probably some of the great authors, like a Jane Austen, again, the lives they lived.
Amazing. And then wrapping up, What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Don't be afraid of failure. We all fail. Embrace it. Learn from it. And make decisions accordingly because of it. I think there's kind of a world out there now where failure is kind of avoided, or in extreme cases, kind of etch-a-sketched out. I've learned more from things I've not managed to do, pitches I've lost, promotions I haven't got, exams I've failed, than I ever learned from the things I've passed or achieved at.
Beautiful. It really resonates. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Pete.